The ledger closes on all accounts. Admiral Kalen watched the light of a dying star paint his command deck in shades of rust and bone. Before him, the main tactical view showed the Kyraxi Dominion fleet, a rigid, unyielding wall of obsidian warships blockading the Janus Pass. Trapped behind them were 12 civilian convoy ships, their engine signatures flickering like frightened heartbeats on the display. The ultimatum had been brutally simple: surrender the convoy and its resources, or every ship would be reduced to incandescent plasma. A timer, stark and white in the corner of the screen, read 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 4 seconds. Lyra confirmed their disposition. Kalen said, his voice a low calm against the thrum of the Vigilance's primary reactor. The ship's fleet mind. Lyra manifested as a column of serene blue light beside his command chair, her synthesized voice devoid of emotion. Confirmed, Admiral. The Kyraxi fleet maintains a Class 4 Dominion blockade formation. 36 Harrower-class frigates in a static shell supported by 12 Executioner-class cruisers. Their lead vessel, the Unsparing Judgment, sits at the geometric center. Tactical Officer Eva Rostova shifted at her console, the glare reflecting off her sharp features. Their doctrine is absolute, sir. They don't negotiate ultimatums. They issue them and they enforce them. Kalen nodded, the polished deck mirroring his grim expression. The scent of ozone from the overworked tactical server filled the air for a moment. He knew their doctrine well. It was a hammer that saw every problem as a nail waiting to be struck. Humanity prefers to build a better hammer. The Kyraxi believed in overwhelming force as the only valid form of communication. They saw mercy as a defect, a fatal flaw in the code of lesser species. The Terran Mandate fleet, however, operated on a different principle. It was a principle Kalen had sworn to uphold, one of restraint and precision. They expect us to break ourselves against their wall, he murmured, more to himself than to his crew. He watched the civilian ships, a cluster of ungainly transports and converted freighters. Inside one, a young girl named Alara pressed her face against the thick plasteel of a viewport, watching the distant, beautiful swirls of the nebula. She clutched a small, worn data slate containing stories her grandfather used to tell her tales of Earth and the bravery of its first explorers. Her mother adjusted the low-power atmospheric recycler, the unit letting out a soft hiss as it worked, a sound that did little to mask the tension shared by the hundreds of families aboard the Stargazer's Hope. They will learn that a wall is merely a door you haven't unlocked yet. Lyra, what is the convoy's status? Kalen asked, his gaze fixed on the tiny icons representing thousands of lives. Nominal for now, the AI replied. Life support is stable, but their energy reserves are finite. They cannot hold out indefinitely, and they cannot run. The simplicity of the trap was its elegance, a brutal equation the Kyraxi had used to subjugate a dozen systems. Surrender or die. There was no third option in their calculus. Then we will give them one, Kalen stated, turning to face his officers. Eva, I want a full spectrum analysis of their sensor net. Focus on refresh rates and any potential gaps in their gravimetric coverage. Ben, prepare the mirror arrays. I want them aligned and ready for a cascade deployment. Engineering Chief Ben Carter's voice crackled over the comms, a steady presence from the heart of the ship. Arrays are cooling, Admiral. Ready on your mark. The lattices are hungry. This is how you teach an empire, the meaning of overextension. The Kyraxi doctrine had a weakness, a subtle flaw born of its own arrogance. It assumed a direct response, a fleet charging headlong into a prepared kill box. They saw the universe as a series of straightforward threats to be bludgeoned into submission. Kalen intended to show them the fallacy of that belief, to introduce a variable they had never encountered, a strategy of reflection. The console beside him shimmered, displaying the intricate patterns of the Kyraxi sensor grid. Lyra's voice was a soft counterpoint to the growing tension on the bridge. Admiral, my projections indicate a frontal assault would result in a 72% loss of our fleet, with an 89% chance of convoy annihilation. Kalen's eyes never left the tactical display. That is why we will not be conducting a frontal assault, Lyra. We are not a hammer. He felt the familiar vibration of the ship's gravitic stabilizers engaging a deep hum that resonated through the deck plates. We are the anvil upon which hammers are broken. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane, but it was rooted in a deep understanding of the enemy. The Kyraxi relied on a centralized command structure with the unsparing judgment acting as the single processing nexus for their entire fleet. Their sensors were powerful but predictable, sweeping the area in rigid overlapping patterns. Their strength is their weakness. Rostova observed her fingers dancing across her console. They trust their network implicitly. If we can fool the network, we can fool their commander. That was the fulcrum of Kalen's strategy. Not to destroy the wall, but to make the wall believe it was somewhere else entirely. He tapped a control, bringing up a schematic of the Janus Pass. It was a treacherous region of space littered with metallic asteroids and pockets of intense radiation. The convoy had been shepherded into the only clear channel, a seemingly safe corridor that had become their cage. The Kyraxi had positioned themselves at the mouth of that cage, waiting for the inevitable. Hold the line because the line is about to move. Ben, Kalen's voice was crisp. Initiate Phase 1. Deploy the decoys, warm the mirrors. On the main screen, a dozen small icons detached from Kalen's fleet, accelerating towards the periphery of the Kyraxi sensor range. They were simple drones designed to mimic the energy signatures of cruisers and destroyers. They were the bait, the first move in a game the Kyraxi did not even know they were playing. The countdown timer ticked down 1 hour 58 minutes. Aboard the Kyraxi flagship, Lord Arbiter Vorlog watched his own tactical display with grim satisfaction. The human decoys appeared exactly as his doctrine predicted, a desperate, futile probe against his impenetrable shield. He scoffed the sound, a low growl in his helmet. Predictable, he subvocalized to his bridge commander. They test the edges, hoping to find a weakness that does not exist. Let them waste their fuel. His strategy was one of patient, overwhelming certainty. Their certainty is a cage of their own making. Kalen saw the Kyraxi ignore the decoys, just as Lyra's psychological profile had predicted. Vorlog was a creature of dogma, unable to conceive of a strategy that did not involve direct application of force. They're not taking the bait. Rostova reported, a hint of concern in her voice. Exactly, Kalen replied. They see it as a feint, a distraction from the main assault they believe is coming. They are watching us, not the space around them. The slight scent of recycled air mixed with the low hum of the life support systems. It was a constant reminder of the fragile bubble of existence they maintained in the void. Lyra, calculate the precise alignment for the mirror lattice. I want a complete reflection of the asteroid field on their port flank. Every ship in their fleet needs to see a ghost army on their screens. The blue light of the AI column pulsed. Calculations complete, Admiral. The geometry is complex but achievable. Projecting the firing solution to tactical. Open the ghost ledger. On Rostova's console, a web of impossibly complex trajectories appeared. The mirror arrays were Kalen's secret weapon, a technology developed not for destruction, but for illusion. Each array was a sophisticated drone capable of projecting a targeted, hyper-realistic sensor ghost. They didn't just mimic energy signatures. They bent and reflected existing ambient signals, starlight radiation, even the enemy's own sensor pings, to create a perfect three-dimensional illusion. They could make a fleet appear where there was only empty space. Ben, execute cascade deployment. On my mark, Kalen ordered. Fire the mirrors. The Vigilance and its escorts shuddered slightly as launch tubes opened along their hulls. Hundreds of sleek silver drones no bigger than a fighter craft shot out into the void, silent and cold. They moved not towards the enemy, but away, fanning out into a vast, precisely calculated formation in the dark space between the fleets. Tonight, their own eyes will become their worst enemy. Aboard the unsparing Judgment, Vorlog's tactical officer suddenly stiffened. Lord Arbiter, massive energy readings on the port flank. It's a fleet. A huge one. Vorlog's head snapped towards the main display. Where moments before there had been only the swirling dust of the Janus Pass, there was now an entire armada. Dozens of capital ships, as well hundreds of fighters, all accelerating towards them on an attack vector. The sheer scale of it was impossible. It cannot be. Vorlog snarled, his composure cracking for the first time. Where did they come from? Des scanned them again. The results were the same. The signatures were perfect. The heat blooms consistent. The gravimetric distortions undeniable. The human fleet had somehow concealed a second massive force, and now it was descending upon them. The arrogance that had been his shield just moments before now turned to cold fury. They are aiming at shadows, and the debt is coming due. All ships reorient port, engage the new threat, annihilate them. Vorlog's command echoed across the Kyraxi fleet. The rigid, perfect blockade formation broke. 36 Harrower-class frigates and 12 Executioner-class cruisers turned their powerful main weapons away from the trapped convoy and the small human fleet pivoting to face the Phantom Army. The cost of this maneuver was enormous, a massive expenditure of energy and a complete disruption of their tactical doctrine. Kalen watched the Kyraxi fleet turn their movements perfectly synchronized and utterly foolish. The sight was both terrifying and beautiful. "They took the bait, sir," Rostova said, her voice filled with awe. "The entire fleet is reorienting." The vibration under Kalen's feet changed its rhythm as the Vigilance began to accelerate. "The door is unlocked," Kalen said softly. Lyra signaled the convoy. "It's time to go." The tide turns not with a crash, but with a whisper. A single encrypted message burst from the Vigilance to the lead convoy ship. "Execute, burn pattern Omega. Now." On the bridge of the Stargazer's Hope, the captain, a grizzled veteran of a dozen trade routes, didn't hesitate. "You heard him. Full burn, go, go, go." The convoy ships, which had been feigning engine trouble and power failure, suddenly roared to life. Their powerful, clumsy engines pushed them forward, not away from the blockade, but straight through the gap the Kyraxi had just created. Vorlog saw the convoy moving his tactical display, a chaotic mess of real ships and phantom fleets. "Treachery!" he roared. "Turn back! Destroy the convoy!" But it was too late. His ships were in the middle of a complex reorientation maneuver. Their weapons pointed at ghosts, their formation shattered. To turn back now would take precious minutes. Minutes the convoy didn't have to spare. The timer on Kalen's screen read 1 hour 21 minutes, but it was already irrelevant. Some debts are paid in energy. Others are paid in folly. The human fleet surged forward not to engage, but to escort. They moved to place themselves between the escaping convoy and the disorganized Kyraxi. The mirror arrays, their job done, went inert, their silver hulls vanishing back into the black. The ghost army evaporated as quickly as it had appeared, leaving the Kyraxi fleet pointing their guns at nothing but empty space and the lingering radiation of the nebula. The silence on the bridge of the unsparing Judgment was absolute. "Sir, the convoy is clear," Rostova reported, her voice steady but triumphant. "They're through the pass. Our escort ships are with them." Kalen allowed himself a small, tight smile. The first part of his plan was complete. He had broken the siege without firing a single lethal shot. He had held to his doctrine of mercy with teeth. But he knew this was far from over. He had embarrassed Vorlog, and a wounded predator was the most dangerous kind. A reckoning delayed is not a reckoning denied. As the last convoy ship cleared the pass, the Kyraxi fleet finally completed its turn. Their rage was palpable even across the vast distance of space. Their weapon ports glowed with furious energy. "They're preparing to fire," Lyra stated calmly. "Their primary targets are our escort ships. Probability of interception of their first volley is 94%. The heat from the tactical display washed over Kalen's face. "Ben, are the outer lattices in position?" Kalen asked, his attention now fully on the enemy fleet. "Positioned and primed, Admiral," Carter's voice replied. "They didn't even see us place them." This was the second layer of his strategy, a trap hidden within the illusion. While the Kyraxi were distracted by the Ghost Fleet, Kalen's stealth ships had deployed a second set of arrays larger and more powerful than the first. These were not for creating illusions, but for reflecting energy. Their anger will be the weapon that unmakes them. "Lord Arbiter, the human fleet is holding its position," the Kyraxi tactical officer reported, his voice trembling slightly. "They are not retreating." Vorlog's face was a mask of cold fury. He had been tricked, made a fool of by a species he considered little more than clever insects. "They are arrogant," he hissed. "They believe their little trick has saved them. Teach them the price of insolence. Fire at will, all ships. Erase them." The Kyraxi fleet unleashed a storm of energy. Dozens of coherent plasma beams, lances of pure destructive power, crossed the void in an instant. They were aimed at Kalen's fleet, a volley so massive it could crack a small moon. But the beams never reached their targets. Halfway between the two fleets, they struck something invisible. The space itself seemed to shimmer, to fold as the lattice arrays activated. The beams of plasma did not dissipate. They bent. You cannot break a mirror by shouting at it. The devastating volley of Kyraxi energy, concentrated and furious, was captured by the gravitic lenses of the lattice. For a fraction of a second, the arrays glowed like miniature suns straining under the immense power. Then, with perfect, calculated precision, they released it. The captured energy, all of it, was redirected. Not back at the Kyraxi warships, which would have been a simple act of war. No, Kalen's target was far more strategic. The redirected beams, now a single impossibly bright spear of light, struck the unsparing Judgment directly on its unshielded command bridge. The flagship's shields had been oriented to face the Phantom fleet, leaving its rear vulnerable. The blast was not explosive. It was surgical. It vaporized the bridge, the command center, and Lord Arbiter Vorlog in a silent, instantaneous flash. The rest of the massive warship was untouched, but its brain had been scooped out. Their doctrine died with their commander. The Kyraxi fleet, so rigid and so disciplined, suddenly fell into chaos. Their central command node was gone. Their doctrine had no contingency for decapitation, for a single, precise strike that bypassed their walls of steel and shields. Ships fired randomly, their formations broke completely, some even began to retreat. They were no longer a fleet. They were a panicked mob. The hum of the Vigilance's bridge was the only sound Kalen heard. "Enemy fleet is in disarray," Rostova announced, her voice a mixture of shock and admiration. "Command structure has collapsed. Multiple ships are broadcasting distress signals." Lyra's blue light seemed to brighten. "Admiral, the Kyraxi doctrine of ultimatum integrity has been fundamentally compromised. Their own weapon was used to neutralize their command. The strategic calculus of this engagement has shifted irrevocably." The faint scent of coolant wafted from a nearby vent, a sign of the immense energy the ship's systems had just processed. "This is the first lesson. There will be others." Kalen stood up, his gaze sweeping over the chaotic mess of the enemy fleet on his screen. He had not sought their destruction, only their education. He had shown them the weakness of their unyielding dogma. He had held a mirror up to their aggression, and they had shattered themselves against their own reflection. "Lyra," he said, his voice resonating with quiet authority. "Open a channel. Broadcast to all remaining Kyraxi ships, unencrypted." The channel opened with a soft chime. Kalen looked directly into the pickup, his image now appearing on the main view screen of every Kyraxi ship in the system. "This is Admiral Kalen of the Terran Mandate Fleet." He began, his voice calm and measured. "Your Lord Arbiter is dead. Your command structure is broken. Your ultimatum has failed." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in across the scattered and confused fleet. "The account is open. The terms are ours. You have two options," Kalen continued. "You can continue this pointless conflict and we will dismantle your fleet piece by piece. Or you can stand down, power down your weapons systems, and accept our terms for your withdrawal." He let the silence hang in the void for a moment. On the bridge of a Kyraxi cruiser, a young captain looked at the human admiral's face on his screen, then at the smoking ruin of his flagship, and made a choice. One by one, the Kyraxi weapon systems began to power down. Aboard the Vigilance, the bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the threat icons on the tactical display turned from red to green. The Kyraxi were surrendering. Not because they were destroyed, but because they were beaten, outmaneuvered, and outthought. "Sir," Rostova said, her voice barely a whisper, "they are complying. They are all complying." Kalen nodded, a deep sense of relief washing over him, followed by the cold weight of what came next. Mercy is not a gift. It is a debt to be carried. The first step was complete. The convoy was safe, the blockade was broken, and the immediate threat was neutralized. But Kalen knew the Kyraxi Dominion would not let this stand. He had not just defeated a fleet, he had humiliated an empire. He had exposed the core flaw in their philosophy of power. This was not an ending. It was the beginning of a much larger, more dangerous confrontation. He had won the battle, but the war for the soul of the sector had just begun. He turned to his crew, the faces of Rostova and the others illuminated by the soft glow of their consoles. The ship was quiet, the only sound the steady thrum of the engines, a metallic heartbeat in the deep black. "Hold our position," he commanded. "Send a medical team to the Stargazer's Hope to check on the civilians, and get me a full damage report from our escorts." Even a victory without a fight has a cost. Two of his escort frigates had minor hull scorching from proximity to the redirected energy blast. The price was acceptable. Brace for the echo, for it will be louder than the shot. Kalen knew that the Dominion would respond not with a single fleet, but with an armada. They would come to reclaim their honor and to erase the memory of this defeat. They would adapt, they would learn, and they would be more ruthless than ever. He had shown them his cards, and now he had to prepare for their counter. His mind was already racing ahead, planning the next move in this deadly game of cosmic chess. He had to turn this system, the site of their humiliation, into a trap they would never forget. Lyra's voice cut through his thoughts. "Admiral, I am detecting a massive gravimetric distortion at the edge of the system, far too large for a single fleet. It is consistent with a Kyraxi strategic hyperspace rift opening." The serene blue light of the AI flickered for a moment. "My projections indicate the arrival of a Dominion battle group command level. Estimated arrival in 36 standard hours." The board was being reset, and the stakes were being raised exponentially. They came to issue an ultimatum. They will receive a reckoning. Before the crisis had even fully resolved, a new one was upon them. Kalen had taught one Kyraxi commander a lesson in humility. Now it seemed he would have to teach an entire battle group the meaning of consequence. The civilian convoy was safe, but his own fleet was now caught deep in hostile territory, with a vastly superior force about to descend upon them. He felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders, heavier than any gravity. Eva, I want every sensor we have focused on that rift. I want to know what we're facing the second it appears. Kalen ordered, his voice once again, a blade of calm precision. Ben, I need every ounce of power you can squeeze from the reactors. Divert non-essential systems. Prepare the entire fleet for system-scale tactical maneuvering. He was not just preparing for a fight. He was preparing to turn the entire Janus system into a weapon. This is not a battlefield. It is a classroom. The crew of the Vigilance moved with quiet efficiency, their actions honed by years of training under Kalen's command. They trusted him, and he trusted them. They were not warriors seeking glory, but guardians holding a line against the darkness. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. The philosophy was the core of their identity, the principle that guided every decision, every sacrifice. They were the shield of the mandate, and the shield would not break. As the new threat loomed, Kalen took a moment to look at the star chart. The Janus system was a complex web of gravity wells, asteroid fields, and nebular clouds. To the Kyraxi, it was just terrain to be conquered. To Kalen, it was a tapestry of strategic possibilities. He saw not obstacles, but opportunities. The same elements he had used to create his illusion could be used to create something far more real, far more permanent. He began to formulate a new plan, one even more audacious than the last. Their pride is the lever. Their rage is the fulcrum. Lyra began modeling a system-wide resonance cascade. Kalen said, his voice low. The AI's light pulsed slowly. Admiral, such a maneuver is highly theoretical. The energy requirements are staggering, and the potential for uncontrolled feedback is significant. The cool, analytical voice of the AI was a necessary check on his own ambition. I am aware of the risks, Lyra, Kalen replied. But the Dominion believes this system is their graveyard. I intend to make it their mirror. His plan was to turn the entire system into a giant lattice array. By carefully positioning his ships and manipulating the gravimetric fields of the local asteroids, he could create a feedback loop, a trap, that would turn the Kyraxi's own weapons against their entire fleet, not just a single ship. It was a gambit of incredible scale and risk, but it was the only path to victory against the overwhelming force that was coming for them. Sometimes the only way to win is to rewrite the rules of the game. A message came in from the civilian convoy, now a safe distance away. It was a simple text transmission from the captain of the Stargazer's Hope. Thank you. For all of us. Attached was a child's drawing, a crayon depiction of a large gray warship shielding a smaller, brightly colored transport from a fleet of angry black triangles. Kalen allowed a rare, genuine smile to touch his lips. This was why they fought. Not for territory or resources, but for the right of children to draw pictures of hope instead of fear. He saved the image to his personal datapad. It was a reminder of the stakes, a tangible symbol of the lives he was sworn to protect. The coming battle would be for more than just survival. It would be a statement, a declaration to the galaxy that the era of brutalist ultimatums was over. The Kyraxi sought to impose their will through fear. Kalen would answer with mathematics, with physics, and with a courage born not of arrogance, but of conviction. Count the cost, for the ledger demands balance. 34 hours until arrival. Rostova announced, her voice tight. The bridge of the Vigilance was a hive of activity. Engineers were pushing the ship's systems to their limits. Tactical officers were plotting complex flight paths through the asteroid fields. Kalen stood at the center of it all, a calm anchor in a rising storm. He felt the low thrum of the deck plates beneath his feet, the lifeblood of his ship, his fleet, his hope. He looked at the tactical display, now a complex web of planned maneuvers and energy projections. It was a beautiful, terrifying tapestry of his own design. The coming fight would be a crucible, a test of everything he and his crew stood for. They would face the fury of an empire, and they would meet it not with equal fury, but with a cold, hard, and unforgiving lesson in the consequences of unchecked aggression. Let them come. The mirror is waiting. The hours ticked by, each one a slow, deliberate beat in the heart of the fleet. The ships moved like dancers in a silent ballet, taking their positions for the grand performance to come. They were not preparing a defense. They were setting a stage. Kalen felt the weight of the future settling upon him, the knowledge that the events of the next 2 days would echo through the history of the galaxy for centuries. He had made his move. Now he waited for the enemy to make theirs. On the bridge of the Indomitable Will, the new Kyraxi command vessel leading the punitive fleet, Grand Arbiter Malakor, reviewed the data from the Janus system. He saw the remnants of Vorlog's fleet scattered and leaderless. He saw the lone human fleet holding its position with what he could only interpret as supreme arrogance. He sneered. This Admiral Kalen had gotten lucky with a parlor trick. Now he would face the true might of the Dominion. Pride is the anesthetic that precedes the amputation. They are waiting for us, Malakor's subordinate noted. They make no move to flee. Malakor's smile was a predator's grin. Of course not. They are fools. They believe they have won. They have no comprehension of the storm that is about to break upon them. He gave the order. Full speed. We will not offer an ultimatum this time. We will simply erase them from existence. A lesson must be taught. The irony was lost on him. Kalen knew what was coming. He knew the mindset of the Kyraxi. He was counting on it. He was leveraging their arrogance, their rage, their absolute certainty in their own superiority. His trap was not just physical, it was psychological. It was designed to exploit the very core of their being, to turn their greatest strength into their most profound weakness. The countdown had started anew, not on a screen, but in the inexorable closing of distance between the two fleets. Hold fast. The anchor is the heart of the storm. As the final hours dwindled, a quiet calm descended upon the vigilance. The preparations were complete. The ships were in position. The plan was in motion. All that was left was the waiting. Kalen walked the bridge, speaking quietly with his officers, his presence a reassuring balm against the rising tension. He stopped at Rostova's station, looking at the sensor display. The Kyraxi fleet was a growing tide of red icons, a wave of pure hostility about to crash against their shores. They are not subtle, Rostova commented, her eyes fixed on the approaching enemy. No. Kalen agreed. They are not. They believe subtlety is for the weak. He looked out at the starfield, at the swirling colors of the nebula that would soon be the backdrop for a battle of unprecedented scale. He thought of the child's drawing of the hope it represented. He thought of the long journey of humanity from a single fragile world to a civilization that dared to stand against the tyrants of the galaxy. Their story ends here. Ours has just begun. The proximity alert chimed a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the quiet hum of the bridge. They are here, Rostova announced unnecessarily. On the main screen, the Kyraxi fleet tore open the fabric of space-time emerging from their hyperspace rift in a terrifying display of power and precision. Hundreds of warships, led by a vessel twice the size of the unsparing Judgment, arranged themselves in a perfect system-spanning assault formation. They were a vision of absolute, uncompromising power. Kalen watched them arrive, his expression unreadable. He felt no fear, only a profound sense of purpose. He had set the board. The pieces were in place. He had offered a lesson, and it had been rejected. Now the final exam was about to begin. Lyra, he said, his voice ringing with the clarity of a bell. Open the ledger. It is time to settle the account. The blue light of the AI pulsed once a silent affirmation. The universe does not bargain. It balances. Grand Arbiter Malakor's voice was a low, confident rumble that filled the bridge of the indomitable will. They hold their ground. An insect's courage. It is meaningless. He made a dismissive gesture to his tactical commander. Signal the fleet. A single cleansing volley. We will boil their ships down to their constituent atoms and leave their failure as a warning in the void. He anticipated a swift, brutal conclusion, another entry in the long, bloody ledger of Dominion victories. From the shadow of the mountain, you cannot see the avalanche you have started. On the bridge of the Vigilance, a young ensign named Corin felt a tremor of fear run through him as he watched the Kyraxi fleet align. The sheer number of weapon ports glowing with imminent death was a sight that could break the nerve of the most seasoned veteran. He gripped the polished steel of his console, the metal cool against his sweating palm, and focused on the calm, steady presence of Admiral Kalen. That calm was an anchor in the terrifying sea of enemy firepower. "They are preparing to fire in perfect unison," Lyra stated, her blue light reflecting in the polished deck. "Their energy output will exceed the theoretical limits of our conventional shielding by a factor of 12. Kalen nodded, his eyes fixed on the unfolding geometry of his trap. "Their unity is the key, Lyra. They believe it is their greatest strength. Today it is their greatest liability." He turned to Engineering Chief Carter. "Ben, are the gravitic regulators spooled?" "Spooled, locked, and ready to dance, Admiral." Carter's voice replied, laced with a tension that betrayed the incredible forces he was about to manage. "We're riding a knife's edge here. The cascade will be energetic. Their power is a river. We will simply redirect its course." Malakor gave the final command. "Fire!" The Kyraxi armada unleashed its fury. Hundreds of coherent energy beams, a blinding torrent of incandescent rage, leaped across the blackness of space. It was not a battle. It was an execution. The energy surged toward Kalen's small fleet, a wave of absolute annihilation, promising a silent, glassy grave. But just as the volley was about to strike, Kalen gave his own order, his voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. "Engage the lattice, now!" Across the system, dozens of stealth ships and drones activated their gravitic projectors. They did not block the incoming energy. They caught it. The beams struck the precisely angled gravitic fields and instead of detonating, were bent. The river of death was diverted, forced into a new channel. It became a contained torrent of plasma roaring through the asteroid field along a path Kalen had meticulously laid out, a glowing serpent of the Kyraxi's own making, trapped within a corridor of manipulated spacetime. A weapon is only as dangerous as the hand that wields it. On the indomitable will, the tactical display showed the impossible. The human fleet was unharmed. The massive energy volley was gone. Or rather, it was still there, a colossal energy signature now moving at incredible speed along the system's periphery. "What is this sorcery?" Malakor demanded, his confidence evaporating into cold confusion. "Where is our fire going?" His officers stared at their screens, their doctrine giving them no answer for a weapon that refused to strike its target. "The energy is being channeled, Grand Arbiter," his tactical officer stammered. "Through the asteroid field. Their ships are using localized gravity wells to steer it." Malakor's eyes widened in dawning horror. He was not witnessing a defense. He was witnessing the priming of a weapon, and he had just provided all the ammunition. He had walked into a trap so vast, so audacious, he hadn't even seen the walls. Sometimes the biggest cages are invisible. "Admiral, the cascade is stable, but the strain on the projector nodes is immense," Ben Carter reported, his voice tight. "The frigate Steadfast at Relay Point Gamma is taking the brunt of the resonance feedback. Her emitters are glowing cherry red." Kalen's eyes darted to the engineering schematic. The steadfast was the linchpin of the entire cascade, the point where the energy stream made its sharpest turn. If her systems failed, the entire river of plasma would break its banks. "Ava, give me a solution," Kalen snapped. "How do we relieve the pressure on the steadfast without breaking the channel?" Rostova's fingers flew across her console, modeling dozens of scenarios in seconds. The low hum of the bridge was punctuated by the sharp clicks of her interface. "We can't, sir, not completely," she answered. "But we can vent a small percentage of the cascade's energy into the Janus Nebula. It will weaken the final payload, but it should save the steadfast. A leader's hardest choice is weighing one life against 1,000. Kalen didn't hesitate. "Do it. Signal the steadfast to prepare for a controlled energy release. Lyra adjusts the final trajectory calculations to account for a 9% reduction in total energy." He would not sacrifice a single ship, a single crew, if there was any other way. His doctrine of mercy extended to his own people first and foremost. This was the difference between his command and Malakor's. It was the variable the Kiraxi could never compute. A brilliant plume of emerald green fire erupted from the side of the plasma river, venting harmlessly into the swirling gases of the nebula. On the bridge of the steadfast, alarms blared as the ship shuddered violently, the heat flash scorching its port side. The captain fought to keep his ship in position, the metal of his command chair groaning in protest. The cost was real. The steadfast suffered heavy external damage and 3 wounded crewmen from the feedback surge, but her core systems held. The line was unbroken. The strongest chains are forged in shared sacrifice. Malakor saw the energy vent and misinterpreted it as a system failure. "They are losing control!" he roared, seizing on the flicker of hope. "Focus fire on that position. Overload their network. Break their pathetic trap." The Kiraxi fleet complied, pouring even more energy into the cascade, a fresh torrent of power that surged into Kalen's waiting arms. They were trying to extinguish a fire by pouring fuel upon it. "They are reinforcing the cascade for us, sir." Rostova said, a note of disbelief in her voice. "Energy levels are back to 100%. The final payload will be significant." Kalen watched the approaching wave of redoubled enemy fire merge seamlessly with the channeled beam. Malakor's desperation had sealed his fate. He had taken the final step into the snare. "The lesson is complete," Kalen said, his voice low and grim. "It is time for the final examination. The universe keeps a perfect ledger." "All ships!" Kalen commanded, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "Final maneuver. On my mark. Close the loop." The fleet of Terran ships positioned at the far end of the system executed their last critical action. They reversed the polarity of their gravitic emitters. The open end of the magnetic corridor was sealed. The river of plasma traveling at near light speed had nowhere to go but back along the path it had carved. The target was not the Kiraxi fleet. It was the unstable bleeding edge of the hyperspace rift they had used to enter the system. The amplified, redirected, and now utterly monumental wave of their own energy slammed into the delicate wound in space-time. The result was not an explosion. It was a collapse. The rift, unable to handle the paradoxical energy feedback, imploded. For a single terrifying moment, a sphere of perfect blackness appeared in the heart of the Kiraxi formation, a sphere that devoured light and matter and hope. They were devoured by the very door through which they came. The sphere of negative space vanished as quickly as it appeared, but its gravitational effects were catastrophic. The implosion sent out a shockwave of warped space-time, a tsunami of gravity that tore through the Kiraxi armada. The rigid, perfect fleet formation was thrown into utter chaos. Ships were slammed into each other, their hulls buckling and rupturing. Smaller frigates were torn apart by the tidal forces. The heart of their fleet, once a symbol of power, became a gravitic killbox, a grinder of steel and dogma. The bridge of the vigilance was silent. The crew stared at the main screen at the tableau of absolute destruction. The Kyraxi fleet was a broken wreck, hundreds of ships disabled, destroyed, or sent tumbling into the asteroid field. They had not been defeated by a single shot from Kalen's fleet. They had been annihilated by the consequence of their own unthinking aggression, turned back on them by the unforgiving laws of physics. The console in front of Kalen gave off a faint scent of hot metal from the processing load. A mirror shows you only what you present to it. Amidst the wreckage, one ship fought its way free. The indomitable will, its engines burning with desperate fury, clawed its way out of the gravity well's edge. Malachor had survived. His ship was damaged. His fleet was gone, but his rage was incandescent. He turned his colossal warship, its remaining weapon ports glowing, and charged directly at the Vigilance. If he was to die, he would take the architect of his humiliation with him. Sir Malachor's flagship is on a collision course. He's accelerating. Rostova shouted the first crack in her professional composure. The indomitable will was a monster, a ship that could absorb and deal 10 times the punishment of Kalen's command cruiser. A direct confrontation was suicide. The air on the bridge grew thick with tension, the low hum of the life support system suddenly audible in the silence. When all else is lost, vengeance is the last refuge of a broken mind. Lyra tactical analysis. Now, Kalen said, his calm voice a stark contrast to the impending doom on the view screen. Is there a weakness? The AI's light pulsed rapidly. The Grand Arbiter's ship has suffered critical structural damage to its ventral power conduits during the gravitational shear. Its shields in that section are fluctuating. A precise strike at coordinates 7 gamma 9 could trigger a cascading power failure. It was a target no bigger than a shuttlecraft on a ship hurtling towards them at impossible speed. A 1 in a million shot, Rostova breathed. Then we only need to take it once, Kalen replied. He looked at his helmsman. Bring us about. Show him our broadside. He was turning his ship into a bigger target, a move of supreme calculated confidence. He was inviting the charge, controlling the geometry of the final, desperate confrontation. The deck beneath him vibrated as the Vigilance pivoted with agonizing grace. Steady hands can thread the needle in the heart of a hurricane. The indomitable will bore down on them a mountain of vengeful metal. Its forward cannons fired lances of energy that splashed harmlessly against the Vigilance's reinforced shields. Kalen watched the range indicator count down. 10,000 kilometers. 5,000. 2,000. He waited, his timing needing to be perfect. The heat on the bridge spiked as the shields absorbed the enemy's fire, the air taking on the sharp scent of stressed emitters. Fire, Kalen said, his voice almost a whisper. A single needle-thin beam of coherent energy shot from the Vigilance's main cannon. It was not a blast of overwhelming power, but a surgeon's scalpel. The beam struck the indomitable will at the exact coordinates Lyra had identified. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a flicker of light rippled across the giant ship's hull. Systems began to short out, lights blinking out in sequence like a dying city. The main engines sputtered and went dark. The bigger they are, the more fragile the pieces that hold them together. The indomitable will floated dead in space, its momentum carrying it harmlessly past the Vigilance. Its weapons were inert, its drive silent. It was a ghost ship, a tomb for a dead ideology. Kalen had not destroyed it. He had simply turned it off. He had answered a roar of rage with a quiet, decisive click. The confrontation was over. Lyra, open a channel to Malachor's ship, Kalen ordered. Audio only. A moment of static, then the channel opened. There was only the sound of labored breathing and the distant crackle of failing systems. Grand Arbiter Malachor. Kalen's voice was even without triumph. You are defeated. Your fleet is gone. Your ship is crippled. I am offering you and your crew sanctuary under the Articles of the Mandate Accords. Power down your remaining systems and prepare to be boarded. Some defeats are so total they become a form of clarity. The reply was a long time coming, a ragged, broken whisper. How? Malachor asked the single word containing the weight of an empire's shattered pride. You had no fleet, no power to match us. Kalen paused, choosing his words carefully. You are correct. We did not match your power. We used it. You brought the sword. We simply provided the stone upon which it was broken. That is the lesson you refused to learn. He cut the channel, leaving the Grand Arbiter to his silence and his epiphany. The aftermath was a scene of quiet, efficient work. Rescue shuttles were dispatched to the disabled Karaxi ships, offering aid and accepting surrenders. The wounded on the Steadfast were tended to. The Janus system was now a sprawling debris field, a monument to the failure of ultimatum doctrine. Kalen watched it all from his command chair, the adrenaline of battle fading into the heavy reality of its consequences. Victory was not a celebration. It was a responsibility. A debt paid in full still leaves a scar on the ledger. Lyra's blue light glowed steadily beside him. Admiral, I have taken the liberty of compiling a full report of this engagement, including all tactical logs and recordings of the Kyraxi ultimatums, the AI said. I am uploading it to the Galactic Concordance Public Ledger under Mandate Precedent 74.3. The filing officially challenges the legality of the Dominion Ultimatum Doctrine as an act of systemic aggression. On the main screen, a confirmation text appeared. The institutional consequence was now a matter of public record. The Kyraxi Empire would be called to account not just by a fleet, but by the rule of law. Kalen looked at the confirmation, then at the wreckage outside. He saw the red icons of the new navigational hazard warnings being plotted across the system map a permanent reminder of what had transpired here. The lights on the bridge had dimmed to a soft, operational blue, the glare of battle replaced by a quiet calm. The mirror arrays, their duty done, were being collected, their pewter-gray surfaces now cool and inert. He stood and turned to Lyra, the hum of the ship, a quiet companion. Power is not the force you can command, but the wisdom to know when not to use it. The Kyraxi saw the universe as a lock that required a hammer. They never considered that a key might work better. We offered them that key, and they refused it. This outcome, this ledger, is the one they wrote for themselves. We simply held the pen steady and let them sign their name to the account. Their echo has faded. Our voice will now be heard.